The old wooden doors of Suffolk County Courthouse creaked open as a petite figure in a navy blazer stepped into Courtroom 7. 16-year-old Emma Mitchell adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses, her dark hair neatly pulled back in a professional bun. The packed courtroom buzzed with whispers as she made her way to the defendant's table, where Maria Rodriguez, owner of a historic family bakery, sat wringing her hands. Judge William Harrison's steely gaze fixed upon Emma, his lips curving into a condescending smirk. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the ornate courtroom as the judge leaned forward, his voice dripping with mockery. "Young lady, are you lost? Perhaps you're looking for your high school's mock trial competition." Scattered laughter rippled through the gallery. Richard Cooper, the opposing counsel representing Boston Development Corporation, didn't bother hiding his amused grin. Emma stood, her posture perfect, her voice steady and clear. "No, Your Honor, I'm here to represent Mrs. Rodriguez in today's proceedings." Judge Harrison's eyebrows shot up. He removed his glasses, cleaning them deliberately with his handkerchief. "This is a court of law, not a school project. Where is Mrs. Rodriguez's actual attorney?" "You're looking at her, Your Honor," Emma replied, maintaining unwavering eye contact. The judge's face reddened. "This is absolutely preposterous. I will not have my courtroom turned into a circus by a child playing dress-up." Emma remained composed, reaching into her leather messenger bag. "Your Honor, before you continue, perhaps you'd like to review my credentials." "Oh, this should be entertaining," Cooper chuckled, but his smile faltered as Emma produced a pristine document and handed it to the bailiff. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Harrison examined the paper, his face cycling through shades of red to pale white. His hands trembled slightly as he looked up, meeting Emma's steady gaze. This is impossible," he stammered. Emma smiled faintly. "Now that we've established my qualifications, Your Honor, shall we proceed with today's hearing?" Mrs. Rodriguez's livelihood and family legacy hang in the balance. Let's go back to where it all began. 6 months earlier, in the historic Cambridge neighborhood of Boston, Emma Mitchell sat in her uncle's study, surrounded by towering bookshelves filled with legal texts. The room smelled of old leather and coffee, a scent that had become synonymous with home since she'd moved in with Uncle Daniel 5 years ago. At 11, Emma had discovered her passion for law while helping her uncle grade papers. By 13, she was secretly attending lectures at Harvard Law School, blending in with the students thanks to her mature demeanor and remarkable intelligence. Now, at 16, she had achieved something extraordinary, passing the bar exam with the highest score in Massachusetts history. But Uncle Daniel, a retired law professor with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair, had advised her to keep her achievement private. "The world isn't always kind to prodigies, Emma," he'd said, adjusting his reading glasses. "Sometimes the element of surprise is your greatest advantage." Emma had taken his words to heart, continuing her normal high school routine while privately devouring legal cases and building her knowledge. She spent her afternoons in the Harvard Law Library, where the librarians assumed she was a professor's daughter, and her evenings discussing complex legal theories with her uncle over homemade pasta. Their peaceful routine changed one snowy December morning when Emma stopped at Rodriguez Family Bakery, a beloved neighborhood institution known for its authentic Cuban pastries and warm atmosphere. The smell of freshly baked bread and cinnamon usually filled the air, but today something was different. Maria Rodriguez, the owner, stood behind the counter, tears streaming down her face as she argued with a man in an expensive suit. Her teenage daughter Sophia watched helplessly from the corner, clutching a worn notebook. "Please, Mr. Cooper, this bakery has been in my family for 3 generations, Maria pleaded. "We can't just leave because some corporation wants to build luxury condos." Richard Cooper adjusted his silk tie, his voice cold. Mrs. Rodriguez, Boston Development Corporation has already purchased this entire block. Your lease termination is non-negotiable. You have 30 days to vacate. Emma, pretending to browse the pastry display, listened intently. Her legal mind was already analyzing the situation, spotting potential violations of tenant rights and zoning laws. As Cooper left, Emma approached the counter. Mrs. Rodriguez, I couldn't help overhearing. Would you mind telling me more about your situation? Maria wiped her eyes, looking at the young girl in front of her. Oh, mi amor. It's complicated legal stuff. Nothing a student should worry about. Emma smiled, purchasing a guava pastry. Try me. Sometimes fresh eyes see things others miss. That evening, Emma sat in her uncle's study, presenting the case. They're exploiting a loophole in the historic building preservation codes, Uncle Daniel. But I found 3 precedents that could help Mrs. Rodriguez keep her bakery. Daniel Mitchell studied his niece's passionate expression, reminded so much of her mother, his sister, who had also fought for the underprivileged before the accident. Emma, if you take this case, everything changes. Are you ready for that? Emma looked out the window at the falling snow, thinking of Sophia's desperate expression and Maria's tears. Some things are worth fighting for, even if it means stepping into the spotlight. The next day, Emma walked into Rodriguez family bakery with a proposal that would change everything. But neither she nor Maria could have predicted the forces they were about to unleash, or the powerful enemies they would make in their fight for justice. Emma spent the next week meticulously building her case for Maria Rodriguez. The Harvard Law Library had become her second home, its vast archives offering sanctuary as she pored over precedents and property laws. The setting sun cast long shadows through the tall windows, but Emma barely noticed, too absorbed in her research. A soft buzz from her phone interrupted her concentration. It was a text from Sofia Rodriguez. They're here again. More suits. Mom's crying. Emma quickly packed her materials and hurried through the winter evening to the bakery. Through the frosted windows, she could see 3 men in expensive suits surrounding Maria at the counter. The smell of fresh bread still lingered in the air, but the usual warmth of the place had been replaced by palpable tension. Mrs. Rodriguez, be reasonable. Richard Cooper's voice carried across the empty bakery. Boston Development Corporation is prepared to offer you a generous relocation package. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Emma pushed open the door, the bell's cheerful jingle contrasting sharply with the tense atmosphere. Cooper turned, his expression darkening when he saw her. This is a private business matter. Please leave. I'm Mrs. Rodriguez's legal representative, Emma stated firmly, moving to stand beside Maria. Any further communication should go through me. The other 2 men exchanged glances while Cooper's face reddened. Is this some kind of joke? Where's your actual lawyer, Mrs. Rodriguez? Maria straightened, drawing strength from Emma's presence. Emma is my lawyer, Mr. Cooper, and she stays. Cooper's laugh was sharp and dismissive. A teenager, really? This is who you're trusting with your family's future. He turned to his colleagues. Come on, gentlemen. We're clearly wasting our time here. As they left, Cooper paused at the door. 30 days, Mrs. Rodriguez. The clock is ticking. Once they were gone, Maria collapsed into a chair, her hands shaking. Sophia emerged from the kitchen, her face streaked with flour and tears. Emma, they're saying we have no choice, that the sale is already final. Emma pulled up a chair, spreading her research materials across one of the small cafe tables. Actually, they're wrong. I've found something interesting. She pointed to highlighted sections of various documents. The building is part of a designated historic district. Any major changes require community board approval and environmental impact studies. Neither has been done. Maria leaned forward, hope flickering in her eyes. What does that mean? It means, Emma smiled, that we have grounds to challenge, not just your eviction, but the entire development project. The question is, are you ready for a fight? Maria looked around at the bakery walls, covered in old family photos spanning 3 generations. Her father teaching her to bake, a wedding celebration, Sophia's first day helping in the kitchen. This place is our heart, our history. Yes, we fight. What none of them noticed was the dark sedan parked across the street, its tinted windows, concealing the man inside, watching and taking notes. The next morning, Emma arrived at her high school, her mind already racing with legal strategies. As she approached her locker, she noticed her classmates whispering and pointing at their phones. Alex Chen, her best friend and computer science whiz, rushed over, his face concerned. "Em, you need to see this." He held up his phone, showing a social media post from Boston Development Corporation. It included a photo of Emma at the bakery, with text questioning her credentials and suggesting she was practicing law without a license. Emma's stomach tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "They're trying to discredit me before we even file the case." Alex scrolled through the comments, his frown deepening. "It's getting nasty."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
"People are calling for investigations, saying you should be arrested." "Let them," Emma replied, though her heart was racing. Sometimes the best defense is letting your opponents underestimate you. During lunch, Emma called Uncle Daniel from the school library. His voice was grave when she explained the situation. "They're playing hardball, Emma. These developers have deep pockets and powerful friends. Are you sure you're ready for this?" Emma watched through the library window as snow began to fall, coating the world in white. "Remember what Mom always said? Justice doesn't wait for convenient timing." She could hear the pride and worry mixing in her uncle's voice. "Your mother would be so proud of you, Emma. But she'd also want you to be careful. These people play dirty." After school, Emma headed to the Suffolk County Courthouse to file their initial motion. The clerk did a double take when she saw Emma, but the paperwork was flawless, and he had no choice but to process it. As she left the courthouse, Emma noticed a man in a dark coat watching her. He looked quickly away when their eyes met, but something about his presence sent a chill down her spine. That evening, the Rodriguez family gathered in their bakery after closing. Emma laid out their strategy, while Maria served fresh café con leche and pastelitos. Sophia sat nearby, taking notes on her laptop, while Alex worked on setting up a secure communication system for them. "Tomorrow, we file our challenge to the development project," Emma explained. "Once that happens, they can't move forward with any demolition or evictions until the case is resolved." "And how long will that take?" Maria asked, worry lines creasing. Her forehead, "It depends. They'll try to fast-track it, claiming economic hardship. But I've requested a full environmental and historical impact review, which could take months." Emma sipped her coffee. "Time is on our side. The longer this drags out, the more expensive it becomes for them." A sharp knock at the door made them all jump. Through the glass, they could see Richard Cooper, along with 2 other men they didn't recognize. Maria hesitated, but Emma nodded reassuringly. "Let them in. Remember, we have nothing to hide." Cooper strode in, his expensive shoes clicking on the tile floor. "Miss Mitchell, I hoped we might find you here. This is Mr. Stone and Mr. Walsh from the Massachusetts Bar Association's Ethics Committee." Emma's heart skipped a beat, but her voice remained steady. "Good evening, gentlemen. How can I help you?" The taller man, Stone, pulled out a notebook. "We've received complaints about possible unauthorized practice of law. Would you care to explain your relationship with Mrs. Rodriguez?" Before Emma, could respond, Cooper interjected, his voice dripping with false concern. "We're only trying to protect Mrs. Rodriguez, you understand? If she's being advised by someone unqualified, it could seriously compromise her rights." Emma stood, walking calmly to her messenger bag. She retrieved a folder and handed it to Stone. "I believe this will address your concerns. You'll find my bar certification, along with supporting documentation of my qualifications." The men examined the papers, their expressions shifting from smug certainty to confusion and disbelief. Stone looked up, clearing his throat. "These appear to be in order, though highly unusual." Cooper snatched the papers, his face darkening as he read. "This is impossible. It must be forged." "Feel free to verify with the Bar Association," Emma replied coolly. "Now, unless you have other concerns, we were in the middle of a private meeting with our client." After they left, Sophia let out a breath she'd been holding. "That was intense. But you were amazing." Emma smiled, but her mind was racing. The developers were pulling out all stops to intimidate them. This was just the beginning. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal maneuvers. Emma's motion triggered an emergency hearing before Judge Harrison, known for his pro-business stance and traditional views. The courthouse buzzed with whispers. As Emma entered Courtroom 7, many people having seen the social media posts about the teenage lawyer, Judge Harrison's initial mockery had given way to barely concealed hostility after Emma proved her credentials. Now, as she presented their case, he interrupted constantly, his tone dripping with condescension. "Miss Mitchell, surely you don't expect this court to halt a multi-million-dollar development project over a simple lease dispute?" Emma stood her ground. "Your Honor, this is far more than a lease dispute. We have evidence that Boston Development Corporation has systematically violated historic preservation laws, environmental regulations, and tenant protection statutes. If I may direct your attention to Exhibit A." She proceeded to lay out a devastating case, citing precedents and regulations with perfect recall. The gallery watched in amazement as this teenager systematically dismantled the developer's arguments. Even Cooper seemed rattled, constantly whispering with his associates. By the end of the hearing, Judge Harrison had no choice but to grant a temporary injunction halting any eviction or demolition plans until a full hearing could be held. It was a small victory, but Emma knew the real battle was just beginning. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around them. Emma handled their questions with professional poise, while Maria spoke passionately about her family's history and the importance of preserving community landmarks. But as they walked to their cars, Alex grabbed Emma's arm. "Em, look!" he pointed to a nearby SUV with tinted windows. Through the windshield, they could see Marcus Stone, the man who'd posed as a Bar Association investigator, talking on a phone and watching them intently. "They're not going to give up easily," Emma said quietly. "We need to be prepared for anything." That night, as Emma worked late in her uncle's study, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Smart kids should know when to back off. Accidents happen." Uncle Daniel found her still staring at the message. His face hardened when she showed him. "Emma, these people are serious. Maybe we should bring in some help." Emma shook her head. "If we show any weakness now, they'll pounce. We have to see this through." But later, alone in her room, Emma allowed herself a moment of doubt. The weight of what she'd taken on pressed down on her. It wasn't just about winning a case anymore. Real people's lives and safety were at stake. She pulled out an old photo of her parents, both passionate civil rights lawyers who died fighting for justice. "I won't let you down," she whispered. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Sophia burst into the bakery, waving a newspaper. "Emma, look at this!" The headline read, Boston Development Corporation linked to multiple historic building demolitions. Pattern of fraud. Alleged. The article detailed similar cases across the state where the company had forced out small businesses and destroyed historic buildings, often through questionable legal means. Emma scanned the article, her mind racing. This is perfect. It establishes a pattern of behavior that supports our case. She looked up at Sophia. How did this story come out? Sophia grinned. Alex may have done some digging and anonymously shared some findings with investigative reporters. Emma felt a surge of gratitude for her friends. They were all in this fight together, but their success had consequences. That afternoon, as Emma left school, a black SUV pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, revealing Marcus Stone's cold smile. "Miss Mitchell, let's talk." "I have nothing to say to you," Emma replied, continuing to walk. "Your uncle's tenure at Harvard was quite distinguished," Stone said casually. "It would be a shame if certain irregularities in his teaching record came to light." Emma stopped, her blood running cold. "Are you threatening my family?" "Just pointing out that actions have consequences. Drop the Rodriguez case and everyone stays happy." The SUV pulled away, leaving Emma shaking with anger and fear. She knew she should tell someone about the threat, but who could she trust? The developers clearly had connections everywhere. That evening, as snow fell softly outside the bakery windows, Emma met with Maria, Sophia, Alex, and Uncle Daniel. The warm smell of baking bread provided a comforting backdrop as they discussed their next moves. "They're scared," Emma explained. "The newspaper article exposed their pattern of behavior, and our case could set a precedent that threatens their entire business model. But they're also dangerous," Uncle Daniel added, his face grave. "These threats have to be taken seriously." Maria wrung her hands. Maybe we should stop. I don't want anyone getting hurt because of me." "No!" Emma's voice was firm. "That's exactly what they want. If we give in now, they'll keep doing this to other families, other communities." She looked around at their concerned faces. "But I understand if any of you want to step back. This isn't your fight." Sophia stood up. "It's all our fight. This bakery isn't just a building. It's part of who we are, what makes this neighborhood special. We can't let them take that away." Alex nodded. "I'm in too. They may have money and connections, but we have something they don't." "What's that?" Maria asked. "The truth," Emma answered. "And each other." As they planned their next moves, none of them noticed the small device that had been planted under one of the bakery's tables, silently recording everything they said. The story of the teenage lawyer and the embattled bakery was spreading. Social media buzzed with debates, and more reporters began digging into Boston Development Corporation's history. Other business owners who had been forced out began coming forward with similar stories. Emma knew their opponents would strike back hard, but as she reviewed her case notes late that night, she felt a fierce determination. Sometimes the biggest battles chose you, and backing down wasn't an option. The morning sun cast long shadows through the frosted windows of Suffolk County Courthouse as Emma Mitchell prepared for the day's hearing. Her hands moved steadily over her documents, arranging them with precision, while the early morning cleaning crew worked around her. The marble halls were quiet, but Emma could feel the storm brewing. Richard Cooper burst through the courthouse doors, his designer shoes clicking against the polished floor. A team of junior lawyers trailed behind him, each carrying stacks of documents. He shot Emma a venomous glare as he passed, muttering something to his associates that made them snicker. Emma remained focused on her preparations, but her mind raced. Yesterday's anonymous tip had revealed that Boston Development Corporation was planning something big. Alex had intercepted communications suggesting they'd found a way to expedite the eviction process, bypassing normal procedures. The courtroom Doors opened, and Maria Rodriguez entered with Sophia. Dark circles under Maria's eyes betrayed her sleepless night, but her spine was straight, her head held high. The aroma of fresh-baked pastries followed her. She'd been stress-baking since 3 a.m. "Emma," Maria whispered, sliding into the seat beside her. "They came again last night, after closing, 2 men in suits asking questions about the building's structural integrity. They had badges, but something felt wrong." Emma's grip tightened. On her pen. "Did you let them inside?" "No." Sophia recorded them on her phone through the window. "Alex is analyzing the footage now." Judge Harrison entered the courtroom, his face stormy. Emma noticed Cooper smirking, and her instincts screamed danger. Something had happened behind the scenes. "Before we proceed," Judge Harrison announced, "the court has received some disturbing information." He fixed Emma with a hard stare. "Miss Mitchell, are you aware that it's a felony to falsify bar certification documents?" The courtroom erupted in whispers. Emma stood, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm also aware that my credentials are completely legitimate as previously verified by this court." Cooper rose smoothly. "Your Honor, we have evidence suggesting otherwise. We've obtained records indicating irregularities in Miss Mitchell's bar exam registration. We move to have her immediately removed from this case." Emma felt the trap, closing but refused to panic. "Your Honor, may I approach?" Judge Harrison nodded curtly. Emma walked forward, removing a sealed envelope from her briefcase. "I anticipated this move. This document is from the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, dated yesterday, specifically addressing and dismissing these allegations. They've thoroughly reviewed my qualifications and confirmed their validity." Cooper's smirk faltered as the judge examined the document. Emma continued, her voice carrying through the silent courtroom. "Furthermore, I find it interesting that Mr. Cooper somehow obtained confidential bar exam records. Perhaps we should discuss how he accessed this private information." The judge's face darkened as he read, "Mr. Cooper, approach." His voice was dangerously quiet. "Care to explain how you obtained these records?" As Cooper stammered through an explanation, Emma returned to her seat. Maria squeezed her hand under the table. The immediate crisis was averted, but Emma knew they'd try. Again, they had to. Too much money was at stake. That afternoon, Emma sat in her uncle's study, surrounded by law books and case files. Uncle Daniel entered with 2 cups of tea, his face concerned. "The gloves are coming off, Emma. Cooper's firm just filed a motion to have me disbarred." Emma's head snapped up. "What? On what grounds?" "They're claiming I helped you falsify documents. It's nonsense, but fighting it will take time and money. Exactly what they want." Emma pushed back from the desk, fury building inside her. "They're trying to isolate me, cut off my support system." "There's more," Daniel said quietly. "Harvard's Board of Trustees received an anonymous package this morning alleging academic misconduct during my tenure. They've opened an investigation." Emma's tea grew cold as they discussed options. The developers were attacking on multiple fronts, trying to overwhelm them with legal challenges while undermining their credibility. But why such aggressive tactics over one small bakery? The answer came that evening in a text from Alex. "Found something huge. Don't use phone. Meet at usual spot." Their usual spot was a quiet corner of the Harvard Law Library, where the ancient heating system's hum made electronic surveillance difficult. Alex was already there when Emma arrived, his laptop open but screen dark. "Rodriguez Bakery isn't just about the bakery," he whispered. "The whole block sits on top of an abandoned subway tunnel. Boston Development Corporation's real plan is to convert it into a private underground parking complex. They've already started selling spaces to luxury condo buyers." Emma's mind raced. "That's why they need full control of the block. The tunnel. Renovation would destabilize the existing buildings. Exactly. And here's the kicker. They didn't disclose this in their permit applications. If this gets out, their investors will run. A floorboard creaked behind them. Emma turned to see Marcus Stone standing there, his expression cold. Clever kids. Too clever for your own good. Alex slammed his laptop shut as Stone advanced. You know, accidents happen in libraries all the time. Books fall. Shelves collapse. Every word of this conversation is being recorded, Emma said, calmly, though her heart hammered, and backed up to secure servers. Stone smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Smart, but there are always ways to discredit evidence. Or witnesses. He dropped a thick folder on the table. Your friend Alex has an interesting juvenile record. Sealed, of course. Would be a shame if it leaked. Emma stood. Are you done? Because we have work to do. Stone's smile vanished. Final warning, kids. Walk away. After he left, Alex slumped in his chair. Emma, he's right. My record was sealed for a reason. You were protecting your sister from an abusive situation. If they leak it, we'll deal with it. I won't. Let them use our pasts against us. But as they left the library, Emma's confidence wavered. The developers weren't just fighting dirty. They were targeting everyone she cared about. She needed a new strategy. The answer came from an unexpected source. That night, as Emma helped close the bakery, an elderly woman knocked on the door. Maria recognized her as Mrs. Chen, who owned the Chinese restaurant next door. I hear you. Fighting the big company, Mrs. Chen said, her accent thick but her eyes sharp. My family had restaurant in New York. Same company, different name. They force us out, destroy building. But I keep papers, many papers. She handed Emma a worn envelope. Inside were documents showing a pattern of illegal practices stretching back decades. Shell companies, bribes, fraudulent inspections, all connected to Boston Development Corporation's parent company. Emma stayed up all night reviewing the documents. By morning, she had a plan. It was risky, but they were running out of options. The next day's hearing started like the others, with Cooper smugly presenting more challenges to Emma's credentials. But this time, Emma was ready. Your Honor, the defense's continued attempts to discredit me suggest they're desperate to avoid discussing the actual facts of this case. Perhaps because those facts reveal a pattern of criminal behavior that extends far beyond one bakery. She presented Mrs. Chen's documents, along with Alex's research on the subway tunnel. Boston Development Corporation isn't just violating preservation laws. They're engaging in fraud, endangering public safety, and deliberately concealing their true plans from investors and regulators. Cooper jumped up. Objection. These allegations are completely unfounded. Are they? Emma countered. Because I've submitted copies of these documents to the SEC, the Attorney General's office, and the Boston Globe. I imagine they'll have questions about the undisclosed tunnel project and its safety implications. The color drained from Cooper's face. Judge Harrison, despite his obvious bias, couldn't ignore the evidence. He ordered a full hearing for the following week. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Emma and Maria. The story of the teenage lawyer taking on corporate developers had captured public interest. But now, with allegations of fraud and public safety concerns, it was exploding. That evening, as snow fell softly outside the bakery windows, Emma met with her growing team. Besides Maria and Sophia, there was Alex with his technical expertise, Mrs. Chen with her documents, and representatives from other small businesses on the block. Uncle Daniel had brought 2 former colleagues from Harvard Law, intrigued by the case's implications. They'll hit back hard, Emma warned. Everyone in this room needs to be prepared. As if on cue, Emma's phone buzzed with a news alert. Boston, Development Corporation had called an emergency press conference. On screen, Richard Cooper stood at a podium, his composure cracking. "These allegations are completely false," he declared. "We are the victims of a coordinated smear campaign led by an unqualified teenager and disgruntled former tenants. We have filed a $50 million defamation lawsuit and will pursue criminal charges for securities fraud against anyone spreading these malicious lies." Sophia gasped, but Emma smiled. "They're scared, really scared." "How can you tell?" Maria asked. "Because innocent companies don't immediately threaten everyone with lawsuits. They're trying to silence us before more evidence comes out." That night, Emma worked late in her uncle's study, preparing for the battles ahead. The defamation suit was designed to bankrupt them with legal fees, but she'd anticipated this. Several prominent law firms, impressed by her handling of the case, had offered pro bono support. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Uncle Daniel entered, holding a letter. "This came for you, hand-delivered." The envelope contained a single page. As Emma read, her hands began to shake. "What is it?" Daniel asked. "An offer. They'll drop everything, the lawsuits, the complaints, the investigations into you. They'll even let the bakery stay, with a new 30-year lease at current rates. In exchange for my silence and my agreement never to practice law in Massachusetts again." Daniel studied his niece's face. "It's a good offer, Emma. Everyone would understand if you took it." Emma looked at the photos on his desk, her parents at their law school graduation, full of hope and determination to change the world. Then she thought of Mrs. Chen, forced out of her family's restaurant, of all the other families and businesses destroyed by corporate greed. She ripped the letter in half. "They don't understand," she said quietly. "This stopped being about one bakery a long time ago. It's about justice, about standing up to bullies who think their money puts them above the law." Daniel smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "Your mother would say exactly the same thing." The next morning, Emma arrived at the courthouse early. As she walked up the steps, she saw television crews setting up. Word of the developer's lawsuit had brought more media attention. But something felt off. The security guard at the entrance was new, and he seemed unusually interested in her briefcase. In the elevator, she noticed a man watching her reflection. In the polished doors, Emma's instinct screamed danger. She took out her phone, quickly typing a message to Alex. "Something's wrong. Backup plan B." She'd barely sent it when the elevator stopped between floors. The lights flickered, and Emma's heart raced. Then Marcus Stone's voice came through the speakers. "Going up?" The rising storm was about to become a hurricane, but Emma Mitchell was ready. Sometimes the biggest battles found you when you least expected them, and backing down wasn't an option. She straightened her jacket, clutched her briefcase tighter, and prepared for whatever came next. The real fight was just beginning. The elevator shuddered to a halt between floors, its emergency lights casting eerie shadows across the polished walls. Emma Mitchell took a deep breath, her mind racing through options as Marcus Stone's voice crackled through the speaker again. "Last chance to be reasonable, Miss Mitchell. Take the deal." Emma's fingers moved swiftly across her phone's screen, activating the recording app Alex had designed. "Mr. Stone, are you admitting to tampering with courthouse elevator systems? That's a federal offense." A low chuckle echoed through the speaker. "Smart girl, always thinking like a lawyer. But you're playing in the big leagues now. Sometimes the law isn't enough." The elevator lurched suddenly, dropping several feet before stopping again. Emma's stomach jumped into her throat, but she kept her voice steady. "You do realize there are security cameras in here? Technical difficulties happen all the time, especially in old buildings." Emma smiled despite her racing heart. "True, that's why Alex installed backup cameras last week. Wave to the live stream, Mr. Stone." The elevator hummed back to life, ascending smoothly to the next floor. When the doors opened, 2 security guards were waiting, along with Uncle Daniel and Judge Harrison himself. "Miss Mitchell," the judge said, his face grave. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Your Honor." Emma stepped out, nodding to Alex, who emerged from behind a pillar with his laptop. "And I believe we have some new evidence to present." Stone was nowhere to be seen, but his message was clear. They were escalating beyond legal channels. As Emma walked into the courtroom, she noticed Richard Cooper in intense conversation with 2 new attorneys she didn't recognize. Their expensive suits and severe expressions marked them as high-powered corporate lawyers. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Harrison took his seat. Despite his previous hostility, the elevator incident seemed to have shaken him. He looked at Emma differently now, with something approaching respect. "Before we begin," he announced, "I want to address the incident that just occurred. This court takes any attempt to intimidate an officer of the court extremely seriously. The FBI has been notified, and until their investigation is complete, we'll have additional security measures in place." Cooper stood quickly. "Your Honor, my clients had nothing to do with any elevator malfunction." "Save it, Counselor," Judge Harrison snapped. "Miss Mitchell, you may proceed." Emma rose, forcing herself to stand tall despite her still shaking hands. "Your Honor, we've uncovered new evidence regarding Boston Development Corporation's true plans for the Rodriguez property and surrounding area." She presented the documents about the underground tunnel project, along with engineering. Reports suggesting the proposed renovations would destabilize the entire block. As she spoke, more business owners from the neighborhood filtered into the courtroom, each carrying similar notices of eviction. "This isn't just about one bakery," Emma continued. "It's about a systematic attempt to destroy a historic neighborhood for profit, while deliberately concealing the safety risks from investors and regulators." Cooper's new lawyers exchanged glances. One of them, a sharp-featured woman with steel-gray hair, stood. "Your Honor, I'm Margaret Blackwood of Blackwood & Associates, representing Boston Development Corporation's parent company. We move to have these proceedings sealed due to proprietary business information." Emma had anticipated this. "Your Honor, the public has a right to know about safety risks to their community. Furthermore, we've filed a motion to join our case with similar claims from 6 other business owners in the affected area." The courtroom buzzed with whispers as more people stood. Mrs. Chen from the Chinese restaurant, Mr. Patel from the bookstore, old Mr. Sullivan from the hardware shop. Each had received the same threatening visits, the same pressure to sell. Judge Harrison studied the growing crowd, then looked at the corporate lawyers. "Motion to seal denied. This is a matter of public interest. Proceed, Miss Mitchell." For the next 2 hours, Emma methodically presented their case, weaving together evidence of corporate fraud, safety violations, and systematic harassment. The corporate lawyers objected frequently, but Emma parried each challenge with precise legal citations. During a brief recess, Uncle Daniel pulled her aside. "They've filed a temporary restraining order against you, claiming harassment. It hasn't been granted yet, but they're pushing for an emergency hearing." Emma nodded, unsurprised. "They're trying to keep me away from the courthouse. What about the FBI investigation into the elevator incident?" Stone's disappeared. His PI license is fake, and the address on his business registration leads to an empty office. Before Emma could respond, Sophia burst into the conference room, her face pale. "Emma, come quick! Something's happening at the bakery!" They rushed outside to find smoke rising from the direction of Rodriguez Family Bakery. Emma's heart stopped as they rounded the corner. Fire trucks surrounded the building, water arcing through the air as firefighters battled flames pouring from the roof. Maria stood on the sidewalk, crying as she watched her family's legacy burn. "It was so fast," she sobbed. "1 minute, everything was fine, then there was an explosion in the kitchen." Emma scanned the crowd, catching a glimpse of Marcus Stone watching from a nearby alley. Their eyes met, and he gave her a small, mocking salute before disappearing into the shadows. "This wasn't an accident," Emma said quietly. Alex appeared beside them, his laptop open. Already on it. The bakery security cameras caught everything. 2 men entered through the back door 20 minutes ago, using professional lock-picking tools. They went straight to the gas line. Emma's hands clenched into fists. "Can you identify them?" "Working on it. But there's something else. I've been monitoring communications between Cooper's firm and Boston Development. This goes way higher than we thought. The parent company is owned by a hedge fund that's been doing this all over the country. They find historic neighborhoods, drive out small businesses, then flip the properties for massive profit." Sophia, who had been comforting her mother, turned sharply. "The same thing happened in New York, Mrs. Chen's restaurant, remember?" Emma's mind raced. If they could prove a national pattern of criminal behavior, it would attract federal attention. But they needed more evidence. As if reading her thoughts, Alex continued, "I found something in their encrypted emails. There's a secured server in their Boston office containing records of all their acquisitions, every dirty deal, every bribe, every threat. We need those files," Emma said. "Already mapped the security system. But getting in there, it would be incredibly dangerous." Emma watched as firefighters finally brought the blaze under control. The bakery's historic facade was scorched, but standing. Inside, 3 generations of dreams and hard work lay in ruins. "They crossed a line," she said quietly. "Time we did too." That night, Emma gathered her growing team in Uncle Daniel's study. Besides Alex's technical skills, they now had support from other business owners, community activists, and even a few anonymous tipsters inside Boston Development Corporation. "What they did today wasn't just arson," Emma explained. "It was a message. They're telling us they can destroy everything we care about and get away with it. But they made a mistake." She spread out blueprints of the developer's office building. "They thought burning the bakery would break us. Instead, it gave us probable cause for an emergency injunction. Judge Harrison signed it an hour ago. No one can enter or leave Boston Development's offices without court approval." "Why is that important?" Mrs. Chen asked. Alex grinned. "Because their security system runs on an isolated network. The only way to access those files is from inside the building. And now they can't remove or destroy evidence," Emma finished. "But we need to move fast. The injunction only lasts 48 hours. The plan they developed was audacious. While Emma kept the lawyers distracted in court, Alex would pose as an IT contractor doing routine maintenance. Mrs. Chen's nephew, a former security consultant, would help him bypass the internal systems." Uncle Daniel frowned as he listened. "Emma, this is incredibly risky if you're caught." "Sometimes you have to break a few rules to serve justice," Emma said, quoting one of her mother's favorite sayings. The next morning, Emma arrived at court dressed for battle. Cooper and his team were already there, looking smug despite the injunction. "I warn you," Cooper said as she passed, "crossing my clients will be the last mistake you ever make." Emma smiled sweetly. "Funny, I was about to say the same thing to you." Inside the courtroom, Emma launched into a blistering examination of Boston Development's safety records. She had saved their most damaging evidence for today, knowing it would keep all eyes on the court proceedings. Her phone buzzed quietly, the signal from Alex. He was in position. Emma took a deep breath and played her final card. "Your Honor, I call Marcus Stone to the stand." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Cooper half rose from his seat, but Emma continued, "Mr. Stone has been served with a subpoena. His testimony about his role in intimidating local business owners is crucial to establishing a pattern of criminal behavior." Judge Harrison nodded. "Bailiff, please bring in the witness." But when the bailiff opened the door, it wasn't Stone who entered. It was a team of FBI agents, led by a stern-faced woman in a dark suit. "Your Honor," the agent announced, "I'm Special Agent Sarah Martinez. We're here to take custody of certain evidence related to an ongoing federal investigation into Boston Development Corporation and its subsidiaries." Cooper jumped to his feet. "Objection, this is completely irregular." "Sit down, Mr. Cooper," Judge Harrison ordered. "Agent Martinez, please proceed." Emma watched as the FBI team entered the courtroom, carrying boxes of files and hard drives. Alex had done it. They had accessed the secured server and found exactly what they needed. "Furthermore," Agent Martinez continued, "we have arrest warrants for several individuals connected to this case, including Marcus Stone and Richard Cooper, for conspiracy, fraud, and witness intimidation." Cooper turned pale, looking frantically at his corporate colleagues. But the Blackwood and Associates lawyers were already gathering their things, avoiding his eyes. Emma felt no satisfaction as she watched Cooper being led away in handcuffs. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice, about protecting people like Maria Rodriguez and their right to pursue their dreams without being crushed by corporate greed. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed as Emma explained how a team of determined community members had exposed a national real estate fraud scheme. But her mind was already on the next challenge, helping the affected businesses rebuild. That evening, as snow fell softly on Boston's historic streets, Emma stood with Maria in front of the damaged bakery. Despite the fire, the Rodriguez family bakery sign still hung proudly, if a bit crookedly. "We'll rebuild," Maria said firmly, "better than before." Emma smiled, thinking of all the people who had come together to fight this battle. "Not alone," she promised. "Never alone." High above them in his chambers, Judge Harrison watched the scene below. He thought about his initial dismissal of the teenage lawyer and how she had proven him wrong in every way. Sometimes, he reflected, justice came from the most unexpected places. The story of Emma Mitchell and the Rodriguez Bakery case would be told for years to come, not just as a tale of David versus Goliath, but as a reminder that one person, armed with truth and determination, could still change the world. But for now, Emma had more work to do. Other communities needed help. Other battles waited to be fought. She was ready. Dawn painted Boston's skyline in shades of gold as Emma Mitchell scrolled through her emails, each message representing another cry for help. News of the Rodriguez Bakery case had spread, and now desperate people from across the state were reaching out, sharing stories of similar corporate tactics and legal intimidation. A message from Philadelphia caught her attention. Another historic neighborhood facing destruction, another community fighting to survive. Emma sipped her coffee, mind already formulating strategies when Uncle Daniel entered the study. "The reconstruction permits came through for the bakery," he announced, dropping a thick folder on her desk. "But there's a problem." Emma looked up, noting the worry lines creasing his forehead. "What kind?" "The insurance company is denying Maria's claim. They're calling the fire an act of criminal vandalism, which isn't covered under her policy." Emma's jaw tightened. Even with Cooper and Stone in custody, the system was still working against them. They know exactly what happened. The FBI confirmed it was arson connected to Boston Development. The insurance company's president sits on the board of the same hedge fund that owned Boston Development, Daniel explained. They're still protecting their own. A knock at the door interrupted them. Alex stood there, laptop under his arm, expression urgent. "Em, you need to see this." He pulled up a news website. The headline made Emma's blood run cold. "Questions arise about teenage lawyers' methods. Ethics investigation launched." The article quoted anonymous sources claiming Emma had obtained evidence illegally, suggesting the FBI raid was based on inadmissible information. There were dark hints about hacked servers and corporate espionage. "They're trying to discredit everything," Emma said quietly. "Not just me, but the whole case." "That's not all," Alex continued, pulling up more. "Windows, similar articles are appearing in newspapers across the country. It's coordinated. They're burning you before you can help other communities." Emma stood, pacing the study. The morning sun cast her shadow long across the floor as she thought, "They're scared, not of me, but of what I represent. If one community can successfully fight back, others will follow," Daniel finished. "The whole predatory system could collapse." A text message lit up Emma's phone. Sofia Rodriguez. "Channel 7 news crew outside the bakery. They're asking about the ethics investigation." "We need to get ahead of this," Emma decided. "Alex, can you trace who's planting these stories?" He nodded. "Already on it. The articles share certain phrases, suggesting a common source. Give me time to follow the digital breadcrumbs." Emma grabbed her coat. "I'll head to the bakery. Uncle Daniel, can you—" "I'll start preparing our response to the ethics board," he assured her. "Go." The drive to Cambridge took longer than usual. Morning traffic clogged with rubberneckers, trying to see the news vans clustered around Rodriguez Bakery. Emma parked a block away, studying the scene. Maria and Sophia stood surrounded by microphones, looking overwhelmed. Emma straightened her jacket and walked purposefully toward the crowd. A reporter spotted her, and suddenly all cameras swung in her direction. "Miss Mitchell, how do you respond to allegations of illegal evidence gathering? Did you hack Boston Development's servers? Are you facing disbarment?" Emma raised her hand, projecting calm authority. "I'll make a statement, but first, I want to show you something." She led the news crews inside the fire-damaged bakery. The acrid smell of smoke still lingered, but cleanup efforts had begun. Community volunteers worked alongside professional contractors, clearing debris and salvaging what they could. "This is what they tried to destroy," Emma said, her voice carrying to the cameras. "Not just a building, but a community. When powerful interests couldn't force these people out legally, they resorted to violence." She turned, facing the cameras, directly. "Yes, I used every tool at my disposal to expose corruption. I make no apologies for that. But everything we did was legal, documented, and necessary to protect innocent people from criminal acts." "But the ethics investigation," one reporter began, "is based on anonymous allegations from the very people we exposed as criminals," Emma countered. "Ask yourselves, who benefits from discrediting this case? Who wants to stop other communities from fighting back?" Her words hit home. Several reporters lowered their microphones, looking thoughtful. Emma pressed her advantage. "The real story isn't about my methods. It's about insurance companies denying valid claims to protect their corporate allies. It's about a system that punishes people for defending their homes and livelihoods. That's what you should be investigating." By afternoon, the narrative was shifting. Local news channels ran stories about the insurance companies' conflicts of interest. Community leaders from other cities came forward with similar accounts of corporate intimidation. Emma worked late into the evening with her growing team, coordinating responses and planning next moves. The study had become their war. Walls covered with maps showing similar cases across the country. "It's like a cancer," Mrs. Chen observed, marking another location where her former neighbors had been forced out, spreading everywhere, destroying communities. "But now we know how to fight it," Emma replied. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Backdoor. Important." Emma slipped out quietly, finding a tall woman in a dark suit waiting in the shadows. "Agent Martinez." The FBI agent nodded curtly. "Walk with me." They moved through the quiet streets, breath misting in the cold air. "The ethics investigation," Martinez said finally. "It goes higher than we thought. Federal judges are being pressured to review your bar admission." Emma's step faltered slightly. "By whom?" "Heritage Capital Partners, the hedge fund that owned Boston Development. They're just one piece of a much larger operation. Real estate is their cover for moving money, some of it very dirty." "Are you saying, I'm not saying anything officially," Martinez interrupted. "But if someone wanted to follow the money, they might want to look into offshore accounts connected to judicial campaign contributions." Emma processed this. "Why tell me?" Martinez stopped, studying her carefully. "Because you remind me of myself at your age, and because sometimes the system needs a shock to fix what's broken." She handed Emma a thumb drive. "I never gave you this. Be careful how you use it." The agent melted into the shadows, leaving Emma holding what felt like a live grenade. She hurried back to share the information with her team. Alex plugged in the drive, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "This is incredible. Account numbers, transaction records. Emma, some of these contributions are definitely illegal. Can we prove it?" "With time. The encryption is heavy, but..." A sharp knock interrupted them. Through the window, they saw 2 police cruisers parked outside. Uncle Daniel answered the door. 2 officers stood there looking uncomfortable. "Daniel Mitchell, we have a warrant to search the premises and an order to seize all electronic devices." Emma's mind raced. They couldn't lose that drive. Alex caught her eye, making a subtle gesture. He had already copied the data to his secure cloud storage. The next few hours were tense. Officers methodically went through the house, boxing up computers and files. Emma watched, outwardly calm, but inwardly seething at the abuse of power. When they finally left, she called an emergency team meeting. The study felt empty without their usual equipment, but the determination in the room was palpable. "They're scared," Emma told the group. "That drive must contain something big. Alex, how long to analyze the data?" "A few days, working remotely, but accessing it now could be considered tampering with evidence." She nodded. "Then we do this by the book. No shortcuts they can use against us." Maria spoke up from where she sat by the window. "The insurance company called. They're offering a settlement, but with conditions. We have to sign a non-disclosure agreement and drop all claims against Boston Development." "They're trying to buy your silence," Mrs. Chen said sharply. "We're not signing anything," Sophia declared. "We've come too far to back down now." Emma smiled, proud of their resolve. "Okay, new strategy. Mrs. Chen, can you contact other business owners who faced similar pressure? We need to build a pattern." "Already done. Many are willing to speak now." "Good. Alex, focus on those financial records, but carefully. Everything documented and legal." "What about the ethics investigation?" Uncle Daniel asked. Emma's expression hardened. "We fight it publicly. They want to discredit me? Fine. Let's put everything in the spotlight, including those judicial campaign contributions." The next morning, Emma faced another crowd of reporters, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood dozens of community members, each with their own story of corporate intimidation and corruption. "They call this an ethics investigation," Emma began. "But the real ethical violation is using the legal system to protect criminals and punish those who expose them." She laid out the pattern of harassment, the suspicious timing of the investigation, and hinted at evidence of judicial corruption. By the time she finished, the story had evolved from questioning her methods to examining systemic abuse of power. Back in the study that evening, Emma reviewed their progress. The insurance company was facing public pressure to honor Maria's claim. Other communities were organizing legal resistance using their model. The tide was turning. Her phone buzzed with a message from Agent Martinez. "Watch your back. They're getting desperate." As if on cue, Uncle Daniel entered with a letter. The Massachusetts Bar Association was convening an emergency hearing to review Emma's license. The date was set for next week. "They're rushing it," Daniel said, "trying to disbar you before we can present our evidence." Emma read the letter carefully. "No, this is perfect. They're giving us exactly what we need, a public forum." She turned to her team, energy radiating from her slight frame. "The Bar Association hearing isn't just about my license. It's our chance to expose everything, every corrupt judge, every illegal contribution, every abuse of power." "They'll try to limit the scope," Daniel warned. "Let them try. The whole country will be watching." Alex looked up from his laptop. I found something in those financial records. It's bigger than real estate fraud. Some of these judges, they're connected to offshore accounts, linked to international money laundering." Emma felt the weight of what they'd stumbled into. This wasn't just about saving a neighborhood anymore. They were pulling threads that could unravel decades of corruption. "One step at a time," she said finally. "First, we save my license. Then we save the soul of our justice system." The next few days were a blur of preparation. Emma worked around the clock, building their case while helping other communities organize their own legal resistance. The movement was growing faster than anyone had expected. Late one night, as she reviewed case files, Emma found an old photo of her parents at their law school graduation. Their proud smiles reminded her why she'd chosen this path. "I won't let you down," she whispered to me. "They're images. The fight goes on." Outside, Boston slept under a blanket of fresh snow, unaware that a teenage lawyer and her dedicated team were about to shake the foundations of power. The real battle was just beginning, and Emma Mitchell was ready for whatever came next. Frost coated the windows of the Massachusetts Bar Association building as Emma Mitchell climbed the granite steps. Television crews lined the sidewalk, their cameras tracking her progress. The morning air felt electric with anticipation. Today's hearing would either end her legal career before it truly began or expose corruption at the highest levels of the justice system. Uncle Daniel walked beside her, carrying a worn leather briefcase filled with evidence. They had spent the night preparing, fueled by coffee and determination. Now, as they approached the heavy wooden doors, he squeezed her shoulder gently. "Whatever happens in there," he said quietly, "I'm proud of you." The hearing room was packed, every seat filled with people standing along the walls. Emma recognized faces from the neighborhood: Maria and Sofia Rodriguez, Mrs. Chen, other business owners who had joined their fight. But there were also stern-looking men in expensive suits, their faces tight with barely concealed hostility. At the front of the room, 7 Bar Association board members sat behind an imposing oak table. Emma recognized several names from Agent Martinez's files, judges and lawyers with questionable financial connections. Their chairman, retired Judge Edward Montgomery, peered at her over half-moon glasses. "This emergency hearing," he announced, "will examine serious allegations regarding Emma Mitchell's conduct as an attorney, including possible ethical violations and illegal evidence gathering." A man in a crisp navy suit stood. James Whitmore, representing Heritage Capital Partners as an interested party. "We have evidence that Miss Mitchell orchestrated cyber attacks against private corporate servers." "Objection," Emma interrupted, rising smoothly. "Mr. Whitmore has no standing in this hearing. Heritage Capital's involvement proves this is a politically motivated attack designed to silence evidence of judicial misconduct." Murmurs rippled through the room. Judge Montgomery frowned. "Miss Mitchell, this hearing is about your conduct, not unsubstantiated allegations against others." "With respect, Your Honor," Emma countered, "my conduct cannot be examined in isolation. The timing and nature of these allegations reveal a coordinated effort to prevent exposure of widespread corruption. She opened her laptop, connecting it to the room's display system. I'll demonstrate that every accusation against me was manufactured by individuals trying to hide criminal behavior, including illegal campaign contributions to sitting judges. "That's enough," Whitmore snapped. "This is outrageous." A new voice cut through the tension. "Actually, it's relevant." Agent Sarah Martinez stood from her seat near the back, holding up her FBI badge. "We're particularly interested in offshore accounts linked to several people in this room." Chaos erupted. Board members whispered urgently among themselves while Whitmore's face turned an alarming shade of red. Judge Montgomery banged his gavel repeatedly. "This hearing will proceed according to protocol," he insisted. "Miss Mitchell, please limit your remarks to the specific allegations against you." Emma smiled. "Of course, Your Honor. Let's start with the timing of this emergency hearing, which coincidentally occurred immediately after we uncovered evidence of judicial bribery." For the next 2 hours, Emma methodically dismantled every accusation. She showed how the anonymous sources questioning her methods traced back to Heritage Capital subsidiaries. She demonstrated that the alleged server hacking never occurred. Alex had accessed files through legal security testing protocols, documented and authorized. But her masterstroke came when she projected a series of financial transactions onto the screen. These records show millions of dollars flowing from Heritage Capital through shell companies into judicial campaign funds and private accounts. Specifically, she highlighted several entries into accounts belonging to 3 members of this board. The accused board members erupted in protests, but their faces betrayed their panic. Judge Montgomery's hands trembled as he shuffled his papers. "This is not the appropriate venue." "It's exactly the appropriate venue," Emma interrupted. "You're questioning my ethics? Let's examine everyone's ethics, including why Heritage Capital was so desperate to stop our investigation that they resorted to arson and attempted murder." She played the elevator surveillance video showing Marcus Stone tampering with the controls, then footage from the bakery fire, clearly showing men connected to Heritage Capital entering before the explosion. "The FBI has this evidence," she concluded, "along with comprehensive records of Heritage Capital's criminal enterprises. The only question is, how many people in this room will be implicated when the full investigation concludes?" Silence fell. Judge Montgomery's face had gone ashen. Several board members were already gathering their things, avoiding eye contact with their colleagues. Whitmore stood again, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "You've turned this hearing into a circus. None of these allegations are relevant to the charges against you." "Actually," Agent Martinez spoke up, "they're extremely relevant. Miss Mitchell's actions were instrumental in uncovering a massive criminal conspiracy. The FBI considers her a valuable witness, not a suspect." More chaos erupted as FBI agents entered the room, carrying arrest warrants for 2 board members and James Whitmore himself. Emma watched calmly as years of carefully constructed corruption began crumbling. Uncle Daniel leaned close, whispering, "Think they regret targeting you yet?" Emma's response was interrupted by Sophia rushing forward. "Emma, quick, check the news!" Alex had been monitoring media coverage of the hearing. Now headlines were breaking across every major network. Federal raids target Heritage Capital offices nationwide. Judicial bribery scandal rocks legal system. Teen lawyer exposes massive criminal enterprise. Judge Montgomery stood. Suddenly, "This hearing is suspended pending." He glanced at the FBI agents now stationed at every exit. "Pending further review." Outside, the media frenzy had intensified. Reporters shouted questions as Emma emerged into the winter sunlight. But her attention was drawn to a familiar figure standing quietly at the edge of the crowd, Judge William Harrison. She approached him, remembering their first contentious courtroom encounter. He looked older now, more tired. You knew, she said. About the corruption, he nodded slowly. Suspected. Never had proof. Sometimes it takes fresh eyes to see what we've learned to ignore. He held out his hand. You've done this old judge a favor, Miss Mitchell. Reminded me what justice really means. The next few days passed in a blur of headlines and revelations. Heritage Capital's empire began to collapse as evidence emerged of decades of corruption. More judges resigned. Investigations spread to other cities where similar schemes had operated. Emma worked through it all, helping coordinate between community groups and federal investigators. The Rodriguez Bakery insurance claim was quickly approved, with additional compensation for damages. Other victims of Heritage Capital's tactics began receiving restitution. Late one evening, Emma sat in her uncle's study, watching snow fall outside. The room felt different now, not just a place to study law, but a fortress where justice had taken root and grown. Maria Rodriguez knocked softly, entering with a box of still warm pastries. Thanks to community support, she had set up a temporary kitchen in a neighbor's restaurant while the bakery was rebuilt. You did it, she said, setting the box down. You saved not just my business, but our whole community. Emma shook her head. We did it together. One person can spark change, but it takes a community to make it last. A text message lit up her phone, another plea for help from another threatened neighborhood. The work wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. They're calling. You the guardian angel of small business now, Sophia teased, entering with more case files. Community groups across the country were requesting Emma's help in fighting similar battles. Emma smiled, remembering Judge Harrison's words about fresh eyes. Sometimes it took an outsider, even a teenage lawyer, to challenge what others had accepted as unchangeable. Uncle Daniel joined them, carrying a stack of newspapers. The headlines told an ongoing story of exposure and accountability, of power dynamics shifting and justice prevailing. Your parents would be so proud, he said softly. Emma touched the photo of them on his desk. They taught me that law should protect people, not exploit them. That justice isn't just about winning cases, it's about changing systems that hurt people. A knock at the door interrupted them. Agent Martinez entered, looking pleased despite her professional demeanor. Heritage Capital's CEO just took a plea deal, she announced. He's naming names, judges, politicians, corporate executives. This goes higher than anyone imagined. How many other communities did they destroy? Mrs. Chen asked, from where she sat reviewing similar cases. Too many, Martinez admitted. But thanks to the evidence you gathered, we can start making it right. The Justice Department is setting up a special task force. They want you involved, Emma. Emma considered this, looking around at her team, her community. The battle that had started with one bakery had grown into something much larger, a movement to reclaim justice, to protect vulnerable communities, to hold power accountable. I'll help, she said, but on one condition. We do this right. No shortcuts, no compromises, real justice for everyone. Martinez nodded, understanding. Sometimes the biggest changes started small, with one person refusing to back down, one community standing together, one case that exposed the truth. Outside, Boston slept under its blanket of snow, unaware that the groundwork for profound change had been laid in a simple study in Cambridge. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles for justice. But tonight, Emma Mitchell allowed herself a moment to appreciate how far they'd come. The system wasn't fixed, not yet. But cracks had formed in the foundations of corruption, letting in light and hope. Sometimes that was enough to start a revolution. Sophia picked up another case file, her face determined. Ready for the next fight? Emma smiled, thinking of all the communities out there waiting for someone to stand up for them. always. The story of the teenage lawyer who took on corporate giants had captured national attention, but for Emma, it was never about the headlines. It was about proving that justice could prevail, that one person's courage could inspire others to fight back. As she began reviewing the next case, Emma thought about all the lessons learned, all the battles ahead. The system might be broken, but it could be fixed. One case at a time, one community at a time, one victory for justice at a time. The night deepened, but lights burned in the study as Emma and her team worked on. They had found their calling, their purpose. The fight for justice never ended, it just evolved, growing stronger with each new voice that joined the chorus demanding change. And somewhere in Boston, in rebuilt bakeries and preserved historic neighborhoods, in communities that stood strong against corruption, hope took root and flourished. Sometimes the biggest changes started with the smallest acts of courage, and a teenage lawyer who refused to back down. Spring sunlight streamed through the windows of Emma Mitchell's new office in downtown Boston. The space wasn't fancy, just a converted warehouse floor shared with other advocacy groups, but the energy was electric. Volunteers bustled between desks, phones rang constantly, and the walls were covered with maps showing communities fighting corporate takeovers across the country. Emma stood at the window, watching construction crews working on Rodriguez Bakery across the street. The historic facade had been restored, and the smell of fresh bread would soon fill the air again. But her mind was on the manila envelope that had arrived that morning. "Another threat?" Uncle Daniel asked, entering with 2 cups of coffee. Emma shook her head. "Worse. Evidence that Heritage Capital wasn't the only corporation using these tactics. Look at this." She spread photographs across her desk. Abandoned storefronts in Detroit, demolished row houses in Philadelphia, displaced families in Chicago. Each image told the same story. Communities destroyed by corporate greed. Global Ventures Corporation, Emma explained. They operate differently than Heritage Capital, but the pattern is the same. They target vulnerable neighborhoods, exploit legal loopholes, and force people out. Alex looked up from his computer station. "I've been tracking their subsidiaries. They're smart, better at hiding their connections. But there's something weird about their permit applications in these cities." Before he could elaborate, Sophia burst in. "Emma, turn on the news. Now!" The office television flickered to life, showing a press conference in Washington. D.C. James Morrison, CEO of Global Ventures, stood at a podium surrounded by reporters. "These accusations of predatory development are baseless," Morrison declared. "Our urban renewal projects bring jobs and prosperity to struggling neighborhoods. We've filed defamation suits against these community organizations and their teenage ringleader, Emma Mitchell." Emma smiled grimly. Took them long enough. "Emma," Daniel warned, "Global Ventures is different. They have former federal prosecutors on staff, connections in Washington, and they're scared." Emma interrupted. "Look at the timing. Right, when we're about to expose their Detroit operation." Maria Rodriguez entered, carrying a box of pastries from her temporary kitchen. "Not just Detroit. My cousin in Miami says they're doing the same thing there. Whole neighborhoods disappearing." Emma's phone buzzed. Agent Martinez requesting an urgent meeting. "Something big is happening," Emma told her team. "They wouldn't attack this publicly unless they're desperate." The meeting point was a quiet corner of the Boston Public Garden. Martinez looked troubled as she handed Emma another file. "Global Ventures isn't just about real estate," the FBI agent explained. "We think they're laundering money for some very dangerous people, international cartels, corrupt politicians. That's why they need the development projects," Emma realized. "Clean money mixed with dirty, all hidden in construction costs and property transfers." Martinez nodded, "But proving it is nearly impossible. They have teams of lawyers, private security, and they play rougher than Heritage Capital ever did. As if to emphasize her point, Emma's phone chimed with a news alert. The headline made her breath catch. Teenage lawyer accused of witness tampering, criminal investigation launched. "It's starting," Emma said quietly. "They'll try to discredit me, then attack everyone associated with our organization." "Be careful," Martinez warned. "These people, they make problems disappear permanently." Back at the office, Emma called an emergency team meeting. Besides her core group, the room filled with community organizers, legal volunteers, and victims of corporate displacement. Global Ventures thinks they can silence us with lawsuits and false accusations, Emma began. "They're wrong. Every attack just proves we're on the right track." She outlined their strategy. Coordinated. Legal challenges in multiple cities, working with investigative journalists, building a network of witnesses and whistleblowers. "They have money and power," she concluded. "We have truth and community. History shows which is stronger." As the meeting ended, an elderly man approached Emma. His hands shook as he handed her a stack of papers. "My grandfather built our house in 1920, he said softly. "Raised 3 generations there. Global Ventures destroyed it last month, said it was condemned, but it was solid. Please, make them pay." Emma studied the documents, anger building. The condemnation order was clearly fraudulent, signed by an inspector who didn't exist. That night, Emma worked late in the office, connecting patterns between similar cases. A shadow falling across her desk made her look up. A man in an expensive suit stood in the doorway. "Miss Mitchell," he said smoothly, "I'm Thomas Walsh, Chief Legal Officer for Global Ventures. I thought we should talk." Emma's hand moved slowly toward her phone. "My attorney should be present for any discussion." Walsh smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, this isn't a legal conversation, just friendly advice. You're young, brilliant. You could have an amazing future. Why throw it away on a hopeless fight?" "Hopeless for who?" Emma countered. "The families you've displaced, the communities you've destroyed." "Progress requires change," Walsh said. "We're improving these neighborhoods. By pricing out the people who built them? By laundering cartel money through construction projects?" Walsh's smile vanished. "Careful, Miss Mitchell. Unfounded accusations can have serious consequences." "So can federal RICO investigations," Emma replied. "How's that for a consequence?" After Walsh left, Emma called Uncle Daniel. "They're worried enough to try bribing me. We must be close to something big." "Emma!" Daniel's voice was urgent. "Mrs. Chen just called. 2 men were asking questions about you at her restaurant, taking pictures." Emma's mind raced. "Get everyone somewhere safe. Use the backup protocol we planned." She worked through the night, scanning documents into secure servers, encrypting files. As dawn broke, she received multiple texts. Community members reporting suspicious surveillance, implied threats, sudden building code violations. The message was clear. Global Ventures would target everyone she cared about. Emma paced her office, wrestling with the weight of responsibility. Fighting Heritage Capital had been dangerous, but this was different. These people had international connections, almost unlimited resources. A knock at the door made her jump. Sophia entered, looking determined. "Stop whatever you're thinking," she said. "We're not backing down." "Sophia, you don't understand. These people—" "No, you don't understand," Sophia interrupted. "My mom lost everything once. Our whole community almost disappeared, but we fought back and won. Now others need the same chance." Emma smiled, despite her fears. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best. Now want to hear what Alex found in those permit applications?" The next week was intense. Emma's team worked around the clock, coordinating with community groups in cities targeted by Global Ventures. Patterns emerged, the same shell companies, the same fraudulent inspections, the same aggressive displacement tactics. But Global Ventures fought back hard. More lawsuits filed, more criminal accusations. Emma's face appeared on hostile news. Segments painted as a dangerous, radical, threatening economic development. The pressure took its toll. Some volunteers quit, scared of the consequences. Others had their jobs threatened or faced sudden tax audits. But for every person who stepped back, two more stepped forward. Emma walked into court every day, facing teams of corporate lawyers with hundreds of years of combined experience. But she had something they didn't, the truth, and an army of witnesses ready to tell it. In Detroit, former Global Ventures employees came forward with evidence of systematic fraud. In Miami, community activists exposed links between development projects and money laundering. In Philadelphia, city officials admitted to accepting bribes for rushed demolition permits. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A junior executive at Global Ventures, troubled by what he'd seen, reached out to Emma's team. He had documents, thousands of them, showing the complete criminal enterprise. Emma met him in a quiet cafe away from surveillance. "Why come forward now?" she asked. The executive, Michael Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen, looked haunted. "They killed my friend," he said quietly. An accountant who asked too many questions. "Made it look like suicide. I can't be part of this anymore." The documents he provided were explosive. Money trails leading to drug cartels, bribes paid to officials across the country, environmental laws violated, safety regulations ignored, all in the pursuit of profit. Emma's team worked frantically to verify and protect the evidence. Alex set up secure servers. Uncle Daniel coordinated with federal prosecutors. Community groups prepared for the backlash they knew would come. It came sooner than expected. Emma was working late when the office security system pinged. Armed men were approaching the building. She triggered the silent alarm, then calmly began shredding duplicate documents. Everything important was already safely backed up, but they didn't need to know that. The door burst open. 3 men in tactical gear entered, weapons raised. But before they could speak, FBI agents emerged from hidden positions. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." The would-be attackers were quickly subdued. Among their possessions, orders to retrieve documents and eliminate witnesses. Global Ventures had finally overplayed their hand. Dawn found Emma standing with Agent Martinez, watching as FBI teams raided Global Ventures offices across the country. CEOs led away in handcuffs, boxes of evidence seized, computer systems locked down. "It's not over," Martinez cautioned. "Companies like this, they have contingency plans, political connections." "Let them try," Emma replied. "The truth is out now. Communities are united. They can't silence everyone." The next few months were a whirlwind of grand jury, testimonies, congressional hearings, and international investigations. The full scope of Global Ventures' criminal enterprise shocked even experienced prosecutors. But Emma focused on the human impact. She worked with community groups to reclaim stolen properties, establish legal aid networks, and build protection against future corporate predators. Rodriguez Bakery reopened, stronger than ever. Other displaced businesses returned. Neighborhoods began to heal. One evening, as Emma watched sunset paint the Boston skyline, Judge Harrison visited her office. "You've started quite a revolution," he observed. Emma shook her head. The revolution was already there, in every community fighting to survive. We just helped give it a voice. The judge nodded thoughtfully. "Your parents would be proud, not just of your legal victories, but of how you've inspired others to fight for justice." Emma looked at the wall of photos, faces of people who'd stood up against corporate giants and won, communities that had found their voice and their power. The work wasn't over. Other corporations would try the same tactics. Other communities would need help. But something fundamental had changed. People had seen that justice was possible, that ordinary citizens could stand up to powerful interests and win, that one person's courage could inspire a movement. Emma Mitchell, the teenage lawyer who had shocked the legal world, smiled as she returned to her work. There were more battles ahead, more communities to defend, more justice to be won, and she was ready for all of it. 1 year later, Emma Mitchell stood in the newly renovated Rodriguez family bakery, surrounded by familiar faces and the warm aroma of fresh bread. Sunlight streamed through restored stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the gathered crowd. Judge Harrison raised his coffee cup to the young lawyer who reminded us what justice really means. The room erupted in applause. The bakery had become more than just a business. It was a symbol of community triumph over corporate greed. Photos on the walls told their story: the fire, the rebuilding, the victories that followed. Emma smiled, thinking of how far they'd come. Global Ventures executives faced federal charges. Heritage Capital's corrupt empire had crumbled. Most importantly, communities across the country had found their voice and their power. The real victory, Emma addressed the crowd, belongs to everyone who refused to back down, who stood together when it mattered most. Maria Rodriguez wiped happy tears from her eyes as she hugged her daughter Sophia, now preparing to study law herself. Mrs. Chen beamed from her seat, her own restaurant thriving next door. Alex, still manning the technical side of their growing advocacy network, gave Emma a proud thumbs up. Uncle Daniel approached, carrying a framed newspaper article. The headline read, "Teen Lawyer's Legacy. New Laws Protect Communities from Corporate Predators." Below was a photo of Emma testifying before Congress, leading to legislation preventing the tactics used by Heritage Capital and Global Ventures. "Your parents would be so proud," he said softly, embracing his niece. "You've changed things that seemed unchangeable." Agent Martinez, who had become a close friend, added, "and inspired a new generation of lawyers who understand that justice isn't just about winning cases, it's about protecting people." The gathering celebrated not just their victory, but the transformation it sparked. Other communities had successfully fought off corporate takeovers. A nationwide network of legal advocates ensured no neighborhood faced these battles alone. Emma's phone buzzed with another request for help, this time from a small town in California. The work wasn't over, but now they had a proven roadmap for success and an army of supporters ready to help. "Ready for the next challenge?" Sophia asked, her law school acceptance letter proudly displayed on the bakery's community board. Emma looked around at the faces of her extended family, not just by blood, but by shared struggle and triumph. Each person had played a crucial role in their victory, proving that true change comes from community strength. "Always ready," Emma replied, "because justice isn't a destination, it's a journey we take together." As the sun set over Boston, casting long shadows through the bakery windows, Emma thought about that first day in court when a judge mocked her youth and credentials. She had proven that sometimes the most powerful force for change comes from unexpected places, even a teenage lawyer who refused to back down.